It is the week of Halloween 2025, and I'm going to do something a little bit different than what I normally do. I usually focus on one movie, but today I'm going to focus on this stack of most of these I've recently binged. We're going to talk about each of these films a little bit, and we'll get into it. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. And see, this is the Mummy collection from Universal Studios. The first Mummy was a 1932 film with Boris Karloff. Now, I didn't watch that movie this year, but recently I've been working on a podcast with Kevin Powers called Conversations in Horror, and we went over three of these films. The second film, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, and The Mummy's Ghost. Now, on The Mummy's Tomb and The Mummy's Ghost, John Cockle joined us for the conversation. Those will eventually be released as an audio-only podcast. So those were, it was fun revisiting those films. Now, what's interesting about The Mummy, now the first Mummy with Boris Karloff is kind of by itself, but then the next four after that is about a different mummy called Karis, and that mummy, those four are almost like they're connected. So in a way, you necessarily have to watch them all, but they are connected to each other, and they kind of follow the same story, though it is a bit of a mess. This is Gretel and Hansel. This has been told a bunch of times, Hansel and Gretel, the fairy tale, but this is a very unique twist on it. Osgood Perkins directed this one. He's the one who recently directed The Mummy. The Monkey, not The Mummy. But this is actually fairly it's pretty impressive. This is a Scream Factory release, and doesn't have a slipcover. It doesn't come with one. It's not a collector's edition, but it does have some pretty impressive special features on it, including audio commentary with Osgood Perkins, and there's also a new interview with the production designer. But as far as this movie, though, it looks quite gorgeous. Now, it is dark. Most of the film is kind of lit in a way that's kind of backlit or side lit, or lit in a way, even like so it takes place like a long, long time ago, back in colonial days, probably the early, when does it take place? Probably the early 1800s or something like that. But it is quite a moody film, and it does have Hansel and Gretel in it, but unlike normally with Hansel and Gretel, they can't go home. The mom actually tells them to get on out of there, because the dad has died and she can't even wrap her head around anything anymore. So she tells them to leave. They continue on their journey, so they can't go home in this one, and they don't leave breadcrumbs. But at one point, on the way there, they go to sleep in this castle, and this golem creature's there, and it kind of comes after them, and then suddenly this huntsman like shoots it with an arrow, and then he tells them what they need to do. He sends them on the way that they need to go, but he tells them not to get off the path, kind of like the yellow brick road. And of course they do, and they end up at the witch's house that we're all familiar with from the story Hansel and Gretel. And the witch here is played by Alice Craigie. Alice Craigie, awesome performance here as the witch. I think my favorite performance of hers is the mother in Sleepwalkers, and I did a review of that, I think, last year. You can check out my review of Sleepwalkers on my channel here, but she's really great in this movie and in that. And there's also a younger version of that witch character. This one, as it gets further into the film, there is a bit of a twist that might hurt your head a little bit. I'm not sure if it quite works. It kind of works, but it kind of is it's a little convoluted. But overall, I thought this movie was really, I enjoyed it. I'm gonna rate this movie on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. I'm gonna give it a 3.5 star rating. I would recommend checking it out. Now, it may get a little tedious in the middle of it, but I think overall, and just the darkness of this, it's not until near the end maybe you see a little bit of lightness, but it's just even the scenes that take place during the day they seem dark. But it does have there's some nice fall leaves, especially earlier on when they're walking down these paths, and all that looks just beautiful in this film. This movie is called May. This is a Vestron Collector's edition, Vestron Collector's series. This is number 32, and this one you can only get from the Lionsgate Limited site. It does have a very nice slipcover on the inside, the same cover art. I'm going to see if there's a reverse here. I think this might be new cover art. No, there's just a white on the reverse, and there's the disc. This movie is Blu-ray only. It's not 4K. This Hansel and Gretel was 4K. Blu-ray only. and it's kind of a Frankenstein story, even though you don't realize that for a while. But this is actually it is kind of an indie movie in a way, but it is quite fascinating about this girl who is she's got a doll, and she's obsessed with this doll, and she wants to put together like a human doll eventually. But this was a lot of fun. I'm going to give this out of 1 to 5 stars. I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. And as far as like if it was a 4K, I would like it a lot better. But I think overall this is effective. It is a smaller scale indie film, but I do like this. And then this is a Hammer film. This is the only Hammer film that it was a zombie Hammer film, if I'm not mistaken. The Plague of the Zombies. We've recently been covering Hammer horror films on Conversations in Horror, but they did cover this one. I wasn't involved with that one because I didn't sign up for it, but I did watch it after the fact, after they were talking about it. And I was like, I thought this was very interesting. It doesn't follow zombies in kind of a George Romero type of zombie. It is more of a voodoo zombie. There's these people they got a way of bringing them back through voodoo, and they don't go around eating flesh or brains or anything like that. But it starts off like with the kind of voodoo ceremony. You got this guy here with the face thing on, and at first it's like, wow, this is a 1966 film. It looked like something out of the 70s almost at first, but then it kind of went into your kind of standard Hammer horror fare that I actually feel. I don't know if I definitely, I guess, love it, but I do, I like that, I like it, but it does follow like a older guy and his daughter. They come into this town to figure out what's going on with these zombies, and then they kind of get caught up in the whole thing. Plague of Zombies, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 stars. This is another Scream Factory release. It's Blu-ray only. It would be nice if they offered a 4K in this. I'll give them like 3.5 for this. Unfortunately, I got this late in the game. It probably originally had a slipcover, but I'm not positive on that. A Return to Salem's Lot. This is another Scream Factory release. This was directed by Larry Cohen, who I previously covered his movie The Stuff, which is a lot of fun. You can check out my review of that on this channel. But this is, I also really like the original Salem's Lot. Now, this is a very bizarre take on this. It is a little off-putting, and it's not. I didn't necessarily enjoy this film that much. I enjoyed it a little bit, but it wasn't like. I appreciate kind of what he wanted to cover it a little bit differently, but I really like Michael Moriarty, who is also in this stuff and several of other Larry Cohen's films, like It's Alive 3, The Island of the Alive. But in this one, it follows him and his son as they inherit a house in Salem's Lot. They go there, and then they start to deal with the vampires. But the vampires are dealt with a little differently here, as they've kind of created their own society, and they're kind of, for the most part, behaving, kinda, but they do have certain times of the year when they go after people and actually drink blood. But they've been coming up with other options, and then they want Michael Moriarty's character, who is a reporter, to write their Bible, and then so they kind of want to keep him in town. But this is, like I say, it is a little slow moving. It's pretty good for the first half, and it doesn't have quite the atmosphere of the first one, and that's something that really hurts this film, is the atmosphere isn't quite right. But there's a vampire that it shows in the woods. I think it ends up being like the main judge guy, but it shows him a few times, and that makeup. This is the vampire from the original Salem's Lot, and that vampire looks pretty crazy. That makeup on him, it looks almost like a puppet vampire maybe. But I'm going to give this one out of 1 to 5. I'm going to give this one a 3-star rating. Now, this is Blood and Black Lace. This is a Mario Bava giallo Italian film, and it's pretty good. And this is not necessarily new, but this is a 4K Arrow video release. I believe this may have originally had a slipcover. I don't have the slipcover. This is what I got. This is the standard edition. This was a lot of. I wouldn't go as far as to say fun. At first, I wasn't really in the mood for this. And I think this is a really good giallo film. Probably one of Mario Bava's better films. At first, I just wasn't quite in the mood and almost cut it off a couple times. And then suddenly I got into it. And it's about these women who are models. There's some kind of blackmail thing going on. And then there's this dude here. he's got a black kind of trench coat thing on and a hat, like a fedora hat, and a white thing over his face. Or is it him or is it a her? A lot of times in these giallos, it ends up being a her, but I'm not going to spoil that. But there is something to it. But but basically he starts killing off these models who are working on some kind of like what I assume is some kind of like runway kind of display of clothing. And he starts killing them off kind of one at a time. And some of the sequences are pretty cool in this film. And there's a lot of guys who are suspects, and then even arrest most of them at one point in the film. I'm not going to give away the twist. I will say it's a little convoluted, but it makes sense. But it is a little convoluted. I'm going to give this out of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. I'm going to give this a 4-star rating. I really enjoy this film. And it looks terrific in 4K. I'm not going to go into all the specs about that, but I think they did a really good job on this release. So I got, let's see, this is Eyes Without a Face. This is a pretty awesome umbrella release, very thick. Here's the cover where it actually says it. This is a French film, and I'm going to be covering this next week on a Conversations in Horror podcast with Kevin Powers. But I did watch it for that, but it kind of threw it into this because it was part of my binging that I was doing. I'm not going to go into a lot of this. It is a black and white film. It is French, and it's pretty impressive about a woman who. See this woman here. I think she had like a wreck, and her face is all messed up. And the dad is a plastic surgeon, and he's trying to find a new face for her. It's a pretty brutal film, and there's a very disturbing scene in about the middle of the film that I thought for sure it was going to cut away, and it just kind of keeps going in an unexpected type of way. But yeah, it's kind of hard to sometimes it's kind of hard to watch because of things like that. So I got 2 more films. And these are big ones. We got Halloween 5, and we have Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. Now, this is part of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 is part of their recent Steelbook collection of A Nightmare on Elm Street. But this one I used to not like that much. And the reason I didn't like it because I really love the third one. And the Dream Warriors do return in the fourth one, the ones that survive. There's only 3 of them that survive. Unfortunately, it does kill them off in this film. Rather early in the film, the Patricia Arquette's character, I think her name's Christy, is played by a different actress here, but I think Tuesday Night, I believe is the actress's name. But I really like Tuesday Night's work here, but it's unfortunately she had to follow after someone else's performance. It's always tough when you have a character in a film and then it goes to the next film and she doesn't return. Patricia Arquette apparently didn't want to return for Part 4 because she didn't want to be typecast in horror films, and that's why it's good. I think now if they can basically make the actors sign a contract saying that if they do another one that they need to come back, because it really messes up continuity. Tuesday Night's performance is pretty good though, and she survives about 40 minutes into the film. Spoiler, but she kind of reminds me of Cheryl Lee in Twin Peaks. But as far as what happens in this one, it's called the Dream Master. And the Dream Master is not Freddy Krueger. It's one of the other characters named Alice. Alice is a great character who's in this one and the 5th one. And as her friends are killed by Freddy Krueger, she starts to kind of get their abilities, including Christie's ability, who had a lot of ability from being a Dream Warrior. She gets those Dream Warrior powers, and she eventually, as the movie goes on, she collects all of her friends' powers, and she's able to fight Freddy Krueger at the end. But this one, and I don't know why I didn't like it back in the day because of the Dream Warriors. I really like the Dream Warriors, but this one is really impressive. There's some really impressive dream sequences. And this one was directed by Rennie Harlin. Now, Rennie Harlin, he's done a lot of action films. Like I covered this recently, The Long Kiss Goodnight, which I had a lot of fun with this one. This is an Arrow release, and you can check out my video of review of The Long Kiss Goodnight on this channel. But he also did Cliffhanger and Die Hard 2. Now, his dream sequences here are very nice. They're some of the better dream sequences of the series. So these scenes are quite impressive, and there's some pretty cool kills in this one, including what you probably know as the cockroach kill, where there was one girl who's lifting a weight, he breaks her arm, and then these cockroach arms like grow out of her arms, and she turns into a cockroach, and then she gets caught in a trap inside of kind of a cockroach trap, and then it turns out he's got it in his hand, and he just crushes it, and it just kind of all comes out. And there's also a pizza scene where like there's a pizza pie, and you got the people's faces of the people that he's killed in there as sausages, and then he takes a knife and stabs one of them, and then eats it. It's like the girl's brother, and there's a very awesome sequence near the end where Krueger is killed again. Don't worry, he'll come back in the fifth one. But then all these souls like come out of him, and it's a pretty impressive practical special effects in this film. I really like, and Freddy is probably on screen more in this one than previously. He gets on the opening credits, he gets top billing. Robert Englund does. So it's and he does. I do feel like he's in it more, and he says more lines throughout the film, and they kind of really were. After the third one, that was kind of what started him doing that more than the other ones. Now there's a little bit of special features on this. This is part of the recent Steelbook collection. I've recently covered part 3 in a video all by itself, but this does have a new 4K transfer. It is HDR. It does look quite nice. I thought everything looked fantastic. This is often. He does have like a certain kind of lighting for a lot of these scenes where he backlights, especially in some of the dream sequences earlier on. But this one actually has some different types of dream sequences. It even has a beach one where she thinks that she's gotten out of the dream, and she imagined herself at a beach, and then Freddy Krueger's hand comes out of the ocean like Jaws, but it's like a Freddy hand. So, but it has a lot of like fun dream sequences like that. So and then there's a lot of action dream sequences as well. So this one is. I have a new respect for this one. I gave it a better chance after being kind of closed-minded about it in the past, because it has a lot going for it, and I do like the main character in this one, Alice. But I'm going to go ahead and rate this one on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. I'm going to give this one a 4-star rating, and I'll give the Steelbook a 4-star rating as well. Now, there's a little bit of special features on here where the director, they're archived special features from a long time ago, but he is some really interesting information about the film. Apparently, this was shot during the writer's strike, and they weren't able to continue writing on it, and they had to do it fast. They had a deadline of like August, where they think they started in February or something like that, and they had to finish it by August. But there's a lot of information about how this movie came about, and I'm surprised it turned out as good as it is, considering all that they're up against. And this one did probably better than most of the other ones in the movie theater, and the reason for that mostly being because the Dream Warriors was such a success that it was kind of riding the coattails of that one. But people still like this one. Some people consider this to be their favorite one, and that brings us to the last of these Halloween binges, which is Halloween 5. The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now, previously this month, it was the first one of the month, I did cover Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Now, this one, I'm also did a podcast on Conversations in Horror about this. You'll be able to check that out. I think Kevin's going to release that later this month. I think on Halloween. But like with Freddy 4, this one really works well with the fourth one. It kind of goes into it, and they kind of work together. Now, a lot of people consider this to be the worst, or one of the worst Halloween films. Most people would consider Resurrection to be the absolute worst. And for a little while, I was kind of thinking that too, but I've changed my mind on that. This is a better film than I was giving it credit for. I think it may have caused some things later on, but to not be as good. But as far as what was delivered here, I think the lighting here is quite interesting. They do have this kind of backlit a lot of times, and there's even a really good interview on this. This is a Scream Factory release. There's a really good interview with the director of photography that was specifically made for this release in 2021, and he talks about the lighting and things of that nature. Now this the problem I think a lot of people have had with this film, one is the main character from the previous film, played by Ellie Cornell. I think her name's Rachel in the film, if I'm not mistaken. But her and Daniel Harris's character, Jamie Lloyd, they got a pretty tight bond in the previous film. Now Jamie Lloyd here is more the protagonist in this one, and they end up killing off. I think her name is, like, again, Rachel. I think they end up killing her off, unfortunately, fairly early. And the reason they did that is because they just didn't want they didn't want people to think that Michael Myers like anybody wasn't safe. And I get why they did it. I think it was a very big disappointment for most people who have seen this film, especially if if they watch the fourth film and suddenly she's killed off. And there is a kind of a tease about it because she doesn't get killed off right away. There's actually, she escapes getting killed a couple times, and then suddenly she gets it. And it is, they thought that might have been a little clever, but it is, for most people, it is disappointing. But as far as like most of this film, though, it kind of, I think it does most of the stuff right for a Halloween film. It does follow. Another thing too that happens, Michael Myers, from the fourth film, you think he's dead, but he escapes, and then this old hermit guy nurses him back to life. And then when he wakes up on Halloween, like a year later, he just kills the hermit, which is kind of a messed up thing to do. And it also doesn't make sense that this guy's taking care of him for a year. But the there's a deleted scene on here. Originally, they had this other character, which is even worse than what we get. And this really goofy character, and they call him Dr. Death. And he's just this, he ends up finding Michael Myers, and he's all got his like shack full of like pentagrams or whatever. He's kind of a witch, and then he takes care of him for a year, and Michael Myers wakes up, and then he decides to kill him. It's the same sort of thing. But what's introduced in this one, which is kind of cool, and it introduces the Man in Black. You see he's got these steel-toed boots. He steps off a train, kicks a dog right away, and you never see him that good. As he's a very mysterious character. But that character eventually at the end helps Michael Myers out of a sticky situation. But that kind of character, they should have played with that more at the beginning. Like, how did he survive that? And it should have been somebody involved with that. And that's really dug into more in the sixth one. There's actually two cuts of the sixth one. There's a producer's cut, and then there's the theatrical cut. But that one really digs into that mythology behind the Curse of the Thorn. And you do see the thorn tattoo on Michael Myers' wrist for the first time in this film. So it kind of brought the series in that direction, which some people really like, some people really hated what happened. But it any extent, the next film kind of stopped the franchise for a while, and they kind of rebooted it with H2O. But as far as this one here, I really, like I said, I have a new fondness for this film, and Donald Pleasance is in this one a pretty good bit, probably more than some of those other ones, and he does come up with a bit of a plan to he tries to talk to Michael Myers at some point in the film, tries to a little bit be a therapist, but doesn't succeed. But he does have more screen time, and I like his performance here pretty good, and Daniel Harris is really good once again. This is a Scream Factory release. This is a slip box. There is, you probably, if you buy it now, you may end up either with this with no slip cover or with a slip cover. I'm going to rate this on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. I'm going to give this one here a 3.5 star rating, and I'm going to give Shout Factory a 4-star rating for their release. And another thing about this one, it is in 4K, and it doesn't say it has HDR grading, but on my TV it says HDR when I hit the button. So, and it also this one looks really, really good in 4K. The dark areas, like the very deep blacks, and the color of the faces and all that look friggin' terrific, especially in this one. But anyway, so that is my binge for Halloween 2025. Let me know if you've seen some of these films, what you think about them, and let me know what you think about me dumping a bunch of movies on you all at one time. Next one would probably be a single movie by itself. But anyway, happy Halloween. In the meantime, I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Thanks for watching. Also, you see this box? Click on that box. It's going to bring you to a video that I've done. It's bring you to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers.